Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Business Essentials webinar. We are going to take a few minutes just to let everybody get going, get settled in, and then we'll get started with the webinar. Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon. I am Amy Stark, Director of Administration for FCSI the Americas. We're really excited to have you here this month again after a hiatus over the summer. I have a couple of announcements before we get started. For today's webinar, please use the Q&A feature on the bottom of the screen to submit questions for Juan. Go ahead and send those throughout the presentation and I can sprinkle them in if we get some, or we can work on those at the end. If you miss anything on today's webinar or want to watch previous episodes, don't forget, you can always look for them on the FCSI the Americas website. We have recordings of all the webinars we have done in the Business Essentials series, and those webinars qualify for 1 CEU credit for FCSI consultant members if you're looking for CEU credits. And so now I'd like to welcome today's presenter. Juan Martinez is principal and founder of Profitality Labor Guru, an industrial engineering consulting company that helps brands optimize their investment to drive better unit economics. His experience spans to over 100 different concepts across all menu and service systems offerings. Juan is a licensed professional engineer with a BS in industrial and systems engineering, an MS in engineering management, and a PhD in ergonomics. He's a current member of the FCSI the Americas Board of Trustees and a regular contributor to the food service equipment and supplies website. Thank you for joining us this month, Juan.
My pleasure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some insights with my fellow FCSI members and others that may be listening.
Yeah.
Well, I got to start with a disclaimer saying I ain't no Wade Kaler. So if you're expecting me to entertain you like he does in the on taps, maybe I will. Very likely I won't. But nevertheless, I hope to be informative in what I share with you. Thought starters, and most importantly, optimistic about, although the title and some of the information I'm going to share is on the pessimistic side, there's always a light at the end of the rainbow. There's a pot of coal at the end of the rainbow. But it's going to take work from the brands, from ourselves, from everybody involved, but therein lies the opportunity. So as I was thinking about a topic, originally I was just going to talk about labor. But I decided to broaden the horizon a little more and talk about the new normal. Again, I just keep in mind that this new normal, so I'm trying to pass the pages. There we go. I think I just did. That this new normal that we keep hearing about, it changes every day. And the reality is that it was changing before. Before we pandemic hit, we had a new normal every day. But it's gotten to be interesting to the point that I call it now the perfect storm. Before I get going, I think it's important for all of you that don't know what we do to get a perspective on what we do. Not so much, it's not meant to be advertisement. It just gives you a perspective on how we look at things. We are an industrial engineering consulting firm, and that's what we call our differentiating proposition. There's two companies that came together. We didn't know what to call it, the new company, because we felt labortality was a little too morbid. So there's two names out there, but if you think about it, the way we go about doing our business is if you optimize the labor and you optimize the facility, you get an optimized investment. Like I said before, our method to the madness is industrial engineering techniques. That's really our differentiating proposition. And the center of our world is the employee. I often tell brands, it's not that I don't care about your guests, is that I care about your employees a lot more. Because we feel that if you take care of the employee and you mind all the operating parameters, and I say mind in both ways, mind, M-I-N-D, and mind, M-I-N-D, and E, I'm sorry, meaning take care of it and understand it and make it easy for them, they will deliver hospitality because you facilitated it. If you deliver hospitality, you'll drive sales. If you drive sales, profits. If you have profits, brand growth. Very simple. That's why we always say, the employee is number one, the guest is a close second. And it's all about developing employee-centric design. What's getting in the way? Anytime I walk into a concept, I ask them, what's getting in your way of delivering the brand promise? And once you understand that analytically, verbally, observations, then you can go and designing it. So why am I referring to this time as a perfect storm? Some of you may wonder what the heck is this perfect storm? Well, if you think historically, and I've been in this business for a long time, running them 40 years soon. But if you think about the challenges the hospitality, restaurant industry, food service industry brings, there's always been issues with labor availability and cost increases. Even the days in the 80s when I joined the Burger King team, we were still always looking about labor increases in cost and availability, food availability and increases. That's always been the issue up and down, depending what business you're in, whether it's salads, whether it's chicken, whether it's beef, it doesn't matter. I mean, it goes up and down. Same thing, equipment and cost increases in that area, construction materials, development costs, occupancy costs, right? Rents are going up and away, and have always been, and distribution and transportation challenges, among many others, many others. We've always dealt with that. The difference is that we used to deal with those one at a time, right? Maybe two at a time. In this day and age, they're all coming, they all seem to be here at the same time. That's why I'm calling it the perfect storm, right? You've got all these things that restaurants have to deal with. And being that I'm from Miami, I have to show a picture of Hurricane Andrew, because look at how well formed that animal was. It was a pretty perfect storm, and it did a number on us. I'm hoping that the current perfect storm, we rise to the occasion in the restaurant industry, and we don't have it impact us like Andrew did. Nevertheless, it is a storm that gives everybody opportunities. First thing that you always look at is what's the impact to shareholder value, to profitability. I'm sure all of you have seen pie charts that look like this: labor costs, cost of goods, occupancy, ops expenses. Some of them have more details. At the end of it all is that blue part, EBITDA. Well, the challenge with the perfect storm is that you have a huge risk of lower profitability if you don't take action. Sometimes you can take actions for the short term and succeed at that, but that action may not be good for the long term. So you have to be careful what action you take. A while back, I did a podcast, and this is in the middle of the pandemic, and I talked about how to protect unit profitability during a pandemic. Well, it's the same. We're coming out of the pandemic, which should always be protecting unit profitability. That's not going to go away. And we have different challenges, in this case, a lot of them at the same time. I want to step back a second as I look at what transpired during the pandemic. I categorize concepts into three categories. One is those that were digitally enabled and off-premise enabled, those that were able to pivot to either or both of these, and those that were not able to pivot fast enough. You know what happened to each one of those categories. The first one thrived, second survived, and the third one struggled or completely died. So clearly, there's some learnings here, and many concepts were able to, even in spite of the very harsh pandemic times, they were able to succeed and to thrive. So same thing's going to happen now. Those that take challenge on, they will survive and they thrive. Those that don't may not be around to tell it. We've all heard the news, and this is sort of I call it the good, the bad, the ugly. The good is that in spite of what's going on now, franchise growth is thriving. Heck, how many public companies, restaurant concepts have gone public? A ton of them. That's the good, right? You keep seeing it. The bad is they need more help, right? And they're looking for the government any other way they can to get help. And food costs are going up. And this is just a chart that I pulled from somewhere out there, but clearly, food costs and many of the costs. I could do a chart like this for just about any category that I shared with you before, and it probably looked the same, going up and away. That's the bad, and the ugly, right? This is like really doomsday. Brace yourself for a mass exodus of employees. U.S. restaurants hiring slowed in September. That's the ugly. Please be patient. We are very understaffed. I love signs like that. Listen, they're honest. They're realistic, and I think consumers get it. And And in some respects, they accept it. But nevertheless, you got to move on and you got to figure out how to still deliver your brand promise. And therein lies an opportunity for a brand to do it and gain the share of sales that are out there, because people are going out. Clearly, in this perfect storm, restaurants are bracing themselves for a future with less workers. Right? You're never going to get the workers back is a feeling. Some of them have gone away. They may never come back. Maybe so, maybe not the case. In some respects, I wonder if we need them back. As you start making changes, everybody evolves, and maybe we won't need as many back. And I'll touch on that later on with automation and a few other areas. But you see restaurants improving overall productivity already, one way, shape, form, or another, right? Because they realize that they have to do it. They've improved productivity of what we call all the operating parameters, whether it's the people, labor, platforms, equipment and technology, the place design, processes and procedures, products and promotions. And if we pick a marketing book, we could probably find a bunch of other P's to put in here. But restaurants are not sitting idle, and we shouldn't either. And we have a great opportunity to help them. Something every once in a while you get a restaurant that really goes out, Raising Cane's, send eight headquarters staffers to run the fryers. Pretty innovative. That's a brand that's out there and definitely a competitive brand and one that people look after. But these are the sorts of things that they've opted to help the restaurants survive these rough periods. First line of defense, as I call it, in this perfect storm is you read every day. Restaurants are taking price increases. These are some examples. Largest price increase since 1981. This is a little bit before I joined the restaurant industry. McDonald's, Del Taco, Chipotle, news like this are in the paper every day, right? Restaurants have opted to start passing these cost increases to consumers, whether it's a direct price increase or an indirect subtle one with a cost transfer. And what I mean by that is often if you go to buy off-premise food on a website, on a third-party website, prices are higher. And then on top of that, they may charge you a delivery fee. And consumers are accepting. They understand, and you know what? That's just the nature of the beast for the convenience. But restaurants are taking action. I would tell you that these price increases is certainly a first line of defense, as I stated before. And I think short term is okay, accepted by consumers, they understand. But the question is long term, what's going to happen? And I can tell you that it's not what restaurants want to do, but what they have to do to protect profitability. The opportunity here is for those restaurants to become productive and efficient everywhere else and minimize the price increases that they have to take. That's going to drive traffic. So that's something that you certainly want to aspire to help concepts do is, how can I help you be more efficient in other areas so that the price increases that you're taking are lessened? Because there's clearly a correlation between increases in price and decreases in traffic. So one has to be mindful of that clearly. Anyways, I told you that I was going to give you some bad news, but at the moment, let's stop the bad news. We know things are rough. Let's start talking about what concepts can do. And although I'm going to focus mostly with what they can do, every area that concepts can do are areas that we as food service consultants and brand owners can take care of to help them with. So pay attention as you go along, because all these areas is what we can help with, because they're already doing a lot more with less, right? And for example, their higher prices in the higher takeout business have helped. Of course, higher prices, as I stated earlier, help all the time. But the actual takeout business is a more profitable business. I'm sure many of you read or heard that as you were coming out of the pandemic, restaurants that had off-premise and restaurants that had especially drive-through were not eager to open the dining rooms. They were kind of happy with the drive-through business. They're selling the same or more to the drive-through, and it's costing them less. So why are you in a hurry to open the dining room? And that's the beauty of off-premise. It can be very profitable, very profitable. So, but at the same time, our role would be, how do we help brands have a higher level of throughput in the peak hours? Because that's how you drive sales. So a lot of opportunities for us. So let's start with labor here a second. What can restaurants do? Well, obviously the first one is understand what's coming. You know, in my dear state of Florida, we've already voted for $15 an hour over the next 3-4 years, however long it is. And there's many other states that are headed that way. That train has left the station, right, for whatever reason or the other, and it's going to have an impact. And although people write about in this case, as you see on the right, you know, how many job losses are going to be, that's somebody's guesstimate, that's somebody's estimate of what it could be, but there's going to be an impact one way, shape, form, or another within our restaurant industry, food service industry, or outside. But you need to understand, as a brand, understand what's going on. As consultants, we want to understand, we want to read about what's coming, and we want to be able to use that to help our clients and leverage the opportunities. You know, something that I always tell is within the labor costs is not all sales are created equal. They don't have the same labor content. And this chart is a little bit busy and fuzzy in some respects, but there are many ways customers can enter their order. Could be through the front counter, through a server, drive-through, speaker post, digital, phone, app, web, third party, a myriad of orders. I remember when the only option was you order at the counter at the restaurant. Then drive-through came in, then phones came in. Nowadays, it's all over the place. A lot of opportunity. And when you think about it, you could have infinite number of order taking capabilities going into a restaurant, right? A phone, everybody's smartphone becomes an order device. Whereas before you may have 2 or 3 POSs, then you may have 2,000 or 3,000 POSs. And that in itself is a challenge and an opportunity. When you fulfill the orders, when you make it, there's always also a lot of ways when you deliver different ways to get it done. You know, it could be to go in the counter, could be in the tables, pickup, window zone, pick up shelves, lockers, curbside, home office, delivery, catering, just so many of them. And then similarly, you know, the order fulfillment, the who, it's a guest, team member, third party aggregator. That's how it could come to you as well. So you can see that you start doing combination of this and it gets quite complex. And what the main point here is that not all orders are built the same when it comes to labor. This example I give you here, a digital order takes 0 seconds of labor to take the order and to make the change. 0 seconds. So as you're managing labor, that's important to note and account for the fact that you don't need any labor for a digital order when it comes to order taking. Furthermore, when you're making it, you have a little bit more leeway in the time, and you may be able to make it more productively in the back as well. And that's what I mean by different order fulfillments and account for labor. The best way, well, of course, is, you know, it's what we recommend on our consulting business, but the most detailed way to do labor is what we call activity-based labor. What does that mean? Is basically you start by listing all the activities that it takes to deliver the brand. Every single thing, whether it's prep or cleaning a bathroom or assembling a sandwich or taking an order or receiving an order, it doesn't matter. Everything needs to be listed, right? To truly understand what it is. And you wouldn't be surprised if that list could be 400 items, you know, 600 items, or activities, that is. If you add management in there, perhaps even more so, more lists than that. Once you have that, then you create a standard, right? This is what goes back to activity-based. Not all activities take the same time. Not all orders take the same time to produce. And there's many ways to do that. We got engineering standards, stopwatch studies, work sampling, standard data, and other estimates. Again, different ways, different industrial engineering ways to come up with times. At the end of the day, you're coming up with a standard that sometimes we refer to it as a reasonable expectancy to do a task. This is not Speedy Gonzalez doing the task, nor Slowpoke McCoy, right? A reasonable expectancy. What is reasonable to expect from someone to complete the task? More on labor, the scheduling is an important piece. It's not only how long it takes to do something, but when do you do it? Right? If you open at 11 for business, what's necessitating you to bring someone in from 8 o'clock in the morning? What is it they're doing from 8 to 11 that they couldn't do at another time of the day in the shoulders of the schedule? The blue here is sales, and the black is shown as staffing. You can see that this example, someone comes in at 7, but you don't start selling until 10:30. What happens up there? Can you shift that AM schedule somewhere else to the valleys? Notice there's a peak at lunch and there's a peak at dinner, but there's a huge valley in between the lunch and the dinner period, right in here. So can you shift some of this here, or some of the closing here, or vice versa? That's all important. Often what happens is with concepts, when they don't do that, is they run out of hours, and then they shorten the peaks. They'll steal from the peaks, because remember, if I need to bring an extra body for 1 hour of peak nowadays, you probably have to pay them 4 hours. So best way to not have to use so many hours is you shorten your peak. You steal from your peak, and you never reach the business demand. So don't steal labor from the peaks. Steal from somewhere else, because and the peak hours is when you have the captive audience to drive sales. So mind the schedule, mind how you create the schedule, how long it takes, and where do you put it in the schedule is an important one. You know, one of my favorite topics, it's around prep. The old adage is that we do prep from the ground up because that's the purest. That's, you know, the concept started with mama, and mama did it this way, and it's the purest. And as such, we got to continue the tradition. However, you know, there are a lot of factors in prep that, and what I mean by prep is cutting vegetables and cooking chicken, whatever it is that you need to produce to provide guest service. But some of the questions that I always ask is, why do you do it, right? Well, because that's how it was done at the beginning, is it? But does it matter to your guests? The fact that you cook fresh chicken, you know, does it matter to them? And more importantly, can you control consistency? Because prep under control, it's a beautiful thing, and probably the best way you can deliver the food quality. But if you cannot deliver consistency, you defeated the purpose. So can you really control consistency? How do you do it? Are you efficient at it? The other day I was at a concept where they were cutting all different vegetables with a little knife, right? Do you have the right equipment, the right food processing equipment? The operating parameters, you have the processes and procedures, the equipment platforms, the work table place to do it. So how do you do it is important, because whatever prep you have to do it effectively. When do you do it is another question I ask. The prior example, if you do it in the morning, because that's the way you've been doing forever, well, you know what? Can you do it in the middle of the day between the peaks? Account for the shelf life. If a product has a 2 or 3 day shelf life, you can almost do it any time in the day when the labor is there and the demand is not there. Use the shoulder of the peaks, use the shelf life. And then last but not least, how do you manage it? Is it truly work content based? Because if it's not, you're running the risk of an entitlement. The more prep you do in a concept, the more risk you have of an entitlement, because you got 2 or 3 people coming in to do prep. They prep for 8 hours and they go home. It doesn't matter if they prep for $4,000 a day or a $10,000 a day. They're there for 8 hours. Whereas if you have the right guidelines, the right work content I was telling you about earlier, you can account for how much prep, how many hours of prep is $4,000 a day, and how many hours of prep is a $10,000 a day. And now that you know how long prep should take, the rest of the time they're there, you should be able to assign them somewhere else. So prep is a huge, huge area for some concepts, especially those that have a lot of it. Of course, you know, what can I do about labor costs? But be prescriptive and specific about what you want your team members to do. Deployment maps is important. What's the primary responsibility? What's the secondary responsibility? We'll get to design later, but as we do design, make sure there's the ability to slide deploy from one station to the other easily, from the front of the house to the back of the house, for example. So that's important, because you're never going to have a perfect balance. This is not a manufacturing plant that Henry Ford created and you're building the Model Ts. There's variability and productivity changes that happen across the day, based just driven on what the consumer orders. So design with a purpose, be prescriptive, and enable slide deployment. We use the word slide deployment as a pretty big one within the capabilities of the design. At the end of the day, you know, we often work with clients in food service, and the first question that they ask is how much labor do you think you can save us? And the reality is that labor, it's not necessarily about savings. Obviously, that's driven by profitability. But the way we look at labor is really about having the right labor in the right place at the right time, doing the right things. And you could add here, doing it the right things the right way, right? It's because a labor is an enabler to sales and to throughput. It used to be that it was about how many people do I need to run my business. Nowadays, there's a secondary track that says, look, if I can only get 5 people, where do I put them to drive the maximum throughput? But it's still the same. It's related to what are they doing? When are they doing it? How are they doing it? How long is it taking them to do it? What are you selling? And that's the best way to manage the labor. So that's on labor. I mean, it could go on and on that in that category, but I want to switch now to food cost, right? We've heard a lot about food cost and availability. The industry asking the president to do something about it. In the Port of LA, I'm sure all of you have seen the videos and the news about all these huge freighters sitting out there. It's crazy. It's pretty crazy, and there's a lot of reasons for that's happening. But at the end of the day, that's driving a supply challenge, which is driving pricing, which is driving many other challenges. So, at the end of the day, the impact is there's ingredient shortages, but there's always a silver lining on every cloud, right? Perhaps as the pandemic taught restaurants to pivot, this shortages of some items, maybe it's going to drive them, teach them how to pivot to do menu changes more intelligently. Because if you can't use something because it's not available and you change it, and all of a sudden to an item that's less expensive, or you get rid of a particular item and the sale's still coming, by de facto, you're still doing what you need to do, but a lower cost basis. So from our perspective, from a brand's perspective, menu component rationalization is a key, right? It's always difficult to remove a menu item. It's easy to add, but in the current environment that we're in, it's less difficult. You need to streamline the menu, whether it's because you're reducing waste or you're simplifying the labor, or both. So, menu component rationalization is a key. I think the extreme is, I read about this, I'm sure you folks read as well, Chicken Concept have started promoting chicken thighs, and they used to be in a chicken wing concept, right? Because wings got expensive. Everybody's doing wings. All these virtual brands seem to be doing wings. But they pivoted, and then they started looking, okay, chicken's got another part. Can I sell it? Will the consumer buy it? So clearly a shift from what they used to do. And us consultants and brands need to open up different opportunities. Menu component analysis, right? If you're using a particular item that has a certain price, what other item can you use to reduce the cost of the end resulting product? Piece of cheese, maybe using an expensive cheese, maybe you can use another type of cheese. Okay, so it changes the flavor profile, or maybe it's good enough. But you need to turn every card when it comes to food costs to make sure that you continue to provide sales to the consumers. So a lot of area in menu rationalization. It's somewhat the same on equipment. As I switch on equipment, I'm sure you folks receive one of these a week at least, if not more. How many of these we get a day? And it's because the suppliers are also protecting their profitability. We're all in it together. You've got to protect profitability across the whole chain of the business. So you've got to take action. So what do we do about equipment costs? Right? There are a lot of things we can do. So for example, right sizing. As you design a concept, as a brand designs a concept, how much do I need of any piece of equipment? Maybe they're used to doing 4 fryers, but you have too many fryers. Maybe 3 fryers should be enough. Also, what I've read a lot about concepts nowadays is they can't get the equipment that has all the bells and whistles that they used to. So they're getting used equipment to get the stores open. Maybe they'll switch them later, maybe they won't. But that way they can get the stores open. Even that's becoming a challenge, just like used cars. That supply chain is drying out pretty quickly. One of the things that we do when in our process of design, it's all about right sizing equipment, right sizing resources. It's not just equipment, it's back of house and front of house. And our process is one where we analytically define how much equipment you should use in the front of the house and in the back of the house. We grab some empirical data, but we also do analytical data that helps us land on the amount of equipment that you need to run the business. So right sizing whether it's a fryer or a grill or a seat or a table or storage or drive-through lanes or front counter POS or counter. Just it all has to be right size to right size the facility, because at the end of the day, after the amount of equipment you put in is going to drive the facility, which is the next topic that I have here. What can they do about construction, development, occupancy costs? Well, mind the building size, but also the frontage and the frontage that it uses. So size and frontage is important. Right size and right shape to be real estate opportunistic. And don't forget to design for off-premise, right? It's you got on-premise, but off-premise means a lot of things. But make sure that the designs that you're doing in new designs facilitate that. And also in existing locations, how can you drive better curbside, better delivery, better drive-through in an existing location? How can you get more cars through to the drive-through? So in the case of an inline, for example, this is a project that we're been involved with, is we look at how do you minimize the frontage, but allow for growth in all directions. Here's an example, right? This is using a 20-foot wide baseline building. The reason we did that is because in a typical inline format, the typical width is 20 feet. I mean, you get smaller and get bigger, but if you design for a 20-foot wide, you're going to be able to get opportunities in many locations. But design it in a way that you could grow forward, but you could grow sideways. If you get a wider building, great, because I know the skinnier fits. If you get a longer building, great as well, because I know the less narrow one, the less long one will fit. So you design to the minimum, to the more core facility available, and knowing that you can grow depending on what's out there. If you look at a freestanding building, and I'm sure you get these articles every week, what can do about construction development costs? Well, mind the building width as well, right? Because if you look at this chart that I have on the right-hand side, it's just a hypothetical example of a building that could have been 54 foot wide, and you end up with 35 foot wide. Well, guess what? In the same real estate, I can put more lanes, I can put more parking spots, I can put a lot more things that are off-premise driven, and you see that all over the place. These are two examples of articles that were out there with Burger King, KFC. I mean, just you name them. Everybody's doing a facility that has multiple lanes. Some go up on the second floor. They want to do curbside. They want to do regular order. You want to do digital order lanes, but you need the real estate, and you want to minimize the real estate. And one way to do that is to mind the building width, because usually you get a lot of depth on the facility, but the width is what allows what costs more expensive. Same as the inline that I showed you earlier. Now, as you do all this, of course, this is all related to managing costs, all the cost line items. We got to keep our eyes as consultants and as brand owners, got to keep an eye on driving sales, because, at the end of the day, if you drive sales, that's, the best way to the bottom line is to the top line, right? But what I mean by driving sales, you want to keep your eyes on that opportunity, but you want to design an engine that facilitates that. I go back to the operating parameters that I shared with you earlier, the ones that the employees have to deal with every day in their jobs. So make all those as efficient as you can. Mind the design and make sure that it's off-premise enabled. Think about what I told you earlier on the new normal. There's infinite order points, and on top of that, there are virtual brands, dark kitchens everywhere around. You keep reading about them. One piece to consider is that some of that those dark kitchens and virtual brands come about because there's excess resources available in some of these locations. So that's a way to use those resources in the same space with all fixed costs that are already in there to drive sales. So, as you design, you want to design from the outside in, how many lanes, how many curbside pickup points, et cetera. But you also need to design from the inside out, right? So from the outside in and from the inside out. Those are two critical pieces that need to match. Mind takeout. One example that you're hearing nowadays is as restaurants are evolving from off-premise and the inside is coming back, how do you balance those two masters, right? How do you drive a good inside experience when you've got an off-premise business that is still booming? Because you want to maintain that off-premise business, without a doubt. But how do you balance the two? That's an important piece to consider, because you want both. You really want to have both businesses running. Again, this is another podcast I did on why food service restaurants, fast food needs a design, means just they need more than just a redesign from the outside. You got to mind the engine, the inside of it, to drive the potential sales that are coming. So fix the production engine. How do you do that? Well, we use the term in industrial engineering, we use the term bottlenecks. There's a bottleneck is a limitation to something, and you're only as good, a restaurant, it's a chain, made up of many links. You're only as strong as your weakest link. If you break that link, you break the chain. So you understand bottlenecks. There's a lot of techniques that we use. Process mapping is one of them. I mean, if you can follow a product going from A through Z, what needs to happen through that whole process? That's important to know. And what are the delays, right? If you think about kitchen time as a metric that you're taking, what all makes up kitchen time? What impacts kitchen time? It could be cook times, of course, right? But percent cook to order, hold time, processes and procedures, the deployment that you have, the responsibilities, how the information flows, where is it going, who's getting it. I often talk about the push system versus the pull system, where in the pull system, an assembler pulls what needs to be cooked, whereas the reality, if you do that, maybe minutes have passed before an item gets loaded into the cook cycle. The design, I mean, there's just so many of them. Speed culture, how many of us have walked into a place where the speed culture is not there, right? Well, it's not there for a reason. It's never taught it. You don't have the KPIs to measure it, because I'm convinced in this industry, people want to succeed and they want to drive more. But think about whatever metric you're taking, in this case, kitchen time, which is related to customer experience from a speed of service perspective, it's something that you want to measure. So, and there's many others. But there's a lot of industrial engineering techniques that we use. Now, continuing on this trek, right? You heard about what can restaurants do to deal with all these challenges they have. Top line sales, how do you facilitate that? A lot been said about robotics, and it's coming. Yeah, it's been coming. I can share with you a 1963 fully automated hamburger concept that AMF, the bowling alley company, did, where there was a fully automated restaurant, 1963, 1965. If you guys do a Google or a web search on automated burger concept, AMF automated burger concept, you can see it. You got a chuckle out of it. The music is fantastic. But anyways, automation has been around, right? I always say that automation goes as demand for automation goes. As minimum wage goes up, there's going to be more demand for automation, without a doubt. But I also want to remind all of us that sometimes we may not recognize automation if we saw it. Those of you that are my age know the Jetsons. But sometimes automation can be, the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Automation's in the eye of whomever's applying it. My definition of automation is devices that will enable activity work content reduction, right? So if it's something that the employee doesn't have to do, I want to categorize it into automation. It's not a device, it's not a machine, but maybe it's a pre-cooked chicken, right? You just happen to have the automation at the supplier. So consider it that way, because there's a lot of different ways in automation. There's some very simple, right? I say food processors or automation. Those have been around forever, right? This example I gave earlier of a concept we're working that was cutting everything by hand. Well, doesn't have to be a sophisticated food processor like this one. Could be a manual one, but nevertheless a food processor. Bulk fry dispensers that QSR uses all over the place. You know what? That's automation, because you don't have, it actually reduces work content. And in the case of many applications in QSR, it enables some other employee to come in, grab a basket, load it, put it in the fryer, and you don't need a fry person as much. Or it could be a fully automated restaurant. This is a bowl assembly concept that was in Boston. I'm not sure if it's still open. I think they closed, they're revamping it, but very, very interesting. Customer operated kiosks is automation in my mind, because the customer is doing it. That's simple as that. And I would say that the best kiosk is your smartphone, right? We all have kiosks in our smartphones, and I assure you, some concepts that started putting kiosks before the pandemic their goal may have been to convert people from a real kiosk to your phone kiosk. But that's the best way. You saw the statistic I gave you earlier, where the guest service required to produce, here's it, that 20 to 25% of the guest service work content that needs to happen in a QSR or a fast casual, it's related to order taking and cash, about 20 to 25%. When you put a clock to it, when you do time and motion. So that's the power of online, digital, off-premise orders. That's why they become more productive. So what can brands do? I'm going to share with you for a full service concept, the redesign. I don't think anybody's doing this. You know what? I take that back. I know some are doing it, and maybe it'll be mainstream, maybe it won't. But imagine you're going into a full service restaurant, and as you're walking in, somebody says, "Hey, I've got service on this side, or I've got a fully automated process on the other side." From a order giving, order taking perspective, and you choose the other one because the other side is full, right? You access your menu via QR code. Everybody's doing that nowadays. I'm sure you come across it in just about anywhere you go. And you order via your phone, and then it goes to the back. Someone brings it to you, although you can have that little robot that you've seen bring it to you. But let's say somebody brings it to you, and then along the way you can reorder and you can request servers via phone. Not a problem. It's all digital, and you pay via phone and you leave, right? That's, that can happen. That's here today. The technology exists today. I call that full service. Is it live or is it Memorex? Remember the old Memorex commercials? It's so good. It is so good that the sound from a Memorex tape was so good that people wouldn't know the difference. So, but that's what may need to happen along the way if we end up not having enough employees to serve. People want service, but people want to eat out, right? Some folks are very prone to accept a fully automated service process in a full service restaurant like this. No problem for some folks. For others, they're all pretty experienced. So, but it's a way to combat some of the challenges we have by redesigning the whole service process. So my message to the brands and to all of us, is, FCSI consultants and suppliers and anybody else that's listening is, let's recognize that when times get tough get going. And this is what happened to the pandemic, with great results for many. You saw how everybody pivoted. Some of the pivoting that was going on was pretty crazy, pretty out there, but nevertheless pivoting, right? And they're probably still pivoting. And we are feeling the effect of some of the pivoting, whether it's in the food service or somewhere else. I've been told the reason that rental cars are so far and few between is because the rental agencies sold their excess inventory when they were not using it. Now that people are going back to travel, they need it, but it's not there. And that's why prices for car rentals are through the roof, but nevertheless pivoting. Yeah. The other message is, you need to stop doing the same things the same way and expect a different result. That's not going to happen. The consumer expects different. You're going to have to deliver different, right? If you don't, then you're a little on the crazier side. That's, I've heard that's the definition of insanity. When you do the same thing the same way and expect a different result. So let's not be crazy. Let's realize that we've got to flip every card. We got to turn every corner and see what can be done to deal with this new normal, with this perfect storm. At the end of the day, is take the right actions in the right place at the right time, and the concept will soar. No doubt in my mind. Whether we help a brand do that, the brands do it themselves. A piece of equipment from equipment suppliers that may be listening here to partners. There's just so much opportunity out there that we can take. So that's the good news. We as food service consultants, as suppliers, whether you're in commercial or non-commercial segment, we can help brands during this perfect storm. A lot that we can do. We just gotta be creative as we go about it. We're looking for improving the efficiency of the current concept, whether it's an existing location or a new prototype. And then you provide ongoing support to drive continuous improvement, because I started by saying, talk about the new normal, right? Dealing with this perfect form, the new normal, where guess what? I truly believe that the new normal was with us before every day of our lives. You walk up to the fact that you were a day older every day. That's a new normal for me. I don't know about you, but it just got sped up with the pandemic. and I think that speed is going to continue to permeate in our business, which creates great opportunities for those that are willing to go at that speed, for those that are willing to embrace this new normal that happens every single day in our lives. So whatever you do today, it's not going to be enough for tomorrow. And that's where continuous improvement comes to play in the way that we help brands and our partners succeed in this perfect storm. And that's it for what I have to say. I want to open it up. Is there questions right now? Maybe let me know what they are, and I'll address them.
Sure. So we have one from Ray. So he says he's been designing more ventless all electric facilities to meet many of the outcomes that you've discussed today. And he'd like to see if you could touch a little bit on the advantages and the ROI of ventless and electric.
So that's an interesting concept. You know, ventless and ROI and electric have been around for quite some time. When I was at Burger King 20 some years ago, we were doing a lot of work with the electric. There was an electric institute in California, I remember. Listen, it's simple. I read recently that somebody got the world record for going across the nation in an electric bike and spending only $5 to do that to make that happen. It's all a matter of supply and demand, in the sense of as gas gets more expensive and there's more social pressure, electricity is going to be much more the norm, and it already is. You see it in the cars, and it's just going to happen. Let alone if you couple that with ventless, now you're talking about clean energy going in, clean energy coming out. You can set up a kitchen anywhere, right? So talk about flexibility of real estate. That's very, very powerful, right? Obviously, all that comes with a price. When you have electric equipment and when you have ventless, it's a bit more expensive. But from a long haul perspective, it's certainly an interesting play. And again, the fact that you could grab just about any real estate location is pretty powerful. One of the reasons that, and I'll pick on a great brand, you know, Starbucks. One of the reasons they grew so fast, number one, they had the brand, right? They had the supply, the demand from consumers. People wanted it. They had the experience, but they could put a Starbucks anywhere because they had no venting to do. As a matter of fact, the venting went into the environment, and it was coffee smells and bakery smells, and it's all like great. So anytime you can apply ventless technology in a cost-effective way, and electric technology, I think long haul, that's here to stay, and it's going to become more of the norm. One man's opinion, so. Yeah.
So we talked before we got started today a little bit about serving the two masters. So thinking about on-premise and then more drive-through and that kind of thing. So you said you had a few ideas, or I knew of a few ideas that were kind of out there. Do you have any that you could share as some of the best practices, or maybe some of the most interesting practices that have happened?
Yeah, most definitely. So I said earlier that if you let me pick on full service, which is probably the one that feels this the most, although this could be across any industry. But full service went from mostly in the restaurant, some takeout. I mean, if you were a good full service takeout, maybe you're in the single digits, 10, 12, 15%, to only takeout, 100%, and then now it's coming back. Maybe they're 80, 70, 60. It depends on the concept. And inside service and demand is coming back, right? But what's going on is the inside demand is likely growing faster than the off-premise demand coming down. So total sales, this is a good problem to have, of course, right? Because that means more sales. Your inside sales are going up. Your off-premise sales are going down, but not at the same rate, at a slower rate. You got a lot more demand in your location. The risk that you run is that you may have a bad inside experience because of demands that the off-premise are driving. And that's important to keep our eyes on, because you don't want to lose. You have both. You want to have both masters. You want to serve both masters. So when you think about a kitchen design, you want to think about the redundancy that's required in the back without adding more labor. I talked about slide deployment earlier. How can I shift people from one to the other? How can they have a primary responsibility, but there's something else that's secondary that they can slide into? How do you do that in an existing line? That's an important piece. We've all read of the likes of Chipotle and Sweet Green. They've created a completely separate line. Well, you know what? If you have the demand, clearly you can create a second line. If you're in full service and you've got a 20-foot hood with grills and fryers and broilers, you can't afford a second line most of the time. So it's a different challenge. But that's the idea. How do you create that redundancy in the back to mine the inside service? They're in a full service is expecting what, a 12-minute service, 10 to 15-minute service, along with the off-premise service, which gives you a little bit more leeway. You know, an off-premise in full service, 20, 30 minutes is okay. So they give you more leeway on that side. So you can have a little bit more of a escape valve, whereas the inside it doesn't. So how do you balance the two? It's a challenge, and it's a good challenge because we're talking about growing sales.
Right. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions we have. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on or thought of before we head out for the day?
No, good from my side. I don't know if there's anything
All
else.
right.
If there's any other, if any other questions come up later, just have them routed by your way or send them to me. My email is here.
Okay, so
gladly,
that's right. That was what I was going to say. If you have any other questions for Juan, if you'd like to, you have his email and contact information there. You can also send them to me and I can forward them along. That works as well. So thank you again, Juan, for being with us today. This was really interesting and really great. I did want to, let's see, let me turn my camera on. I can give you guys our updates for coming up. Our next Business Essentials webinar will take place on November 10th at 3 p.m. Don't forget that you can watch all of our Business Essentials webinars on YouTube. And again, as I said earlier, these webinars qualify for 1 CEU credit for FCSI consultant members. Also remember that our On Tap podcast series episodes are available every Tuesday morning on YouTube, Spotify, and Google and Apple playlist podcasts. This week's guest is James Davila from Davila Studios, so take a minute to check those out. And also, we're looking forward to finally seeing you all in Montreal for the 2022 conference next April 21st through the 23rd. Keep an eye out for emails coming from us as we get registration and hotel information and program material information ready to share with everyone. And again, as I've said earlier, thank you all so much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you in November. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Bye.